us light. By your power, Lord, give us might. Down through the ages, all saints and sages, shine with your light divine. Throughout the land you reach out your hand, that none should be left behind.
Good morning. So today we are starting with a series of talks that will have some meaningful aspect on the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, because this month is great with a specific day to celebrate his advent. So first in this series I have picked up, it is called Chief Apostle of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna had many disciples, may not be very formally could be called disciples, because he was very reluctant to initiate people, give mantra, very reluctant. Even he would say, don't call me Guru or Baba, Father or anything that cringing. He won't like to be considered as even a guru. He was so humble a man, but nevertheless people considered him guru. And in fact, he has also given some initiation to some of the most fortunate people, both who later on embraced the monastic lives or remained a householder devotee. But when we talk about the main apostles of Sri Ramakrishna, we are talking about his monastic disciples, who basically carried the flame, the torch of the fire that was Sri Ramakrishna for the posterity. And they were 16 in number, and if we ask to anyone who has got the most basic of the information about Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda and their great mission, that who was the most important apostle, then there is no confusion or doubt in anybody's mind that it was Swami Vivekananda. So when we say the chief apostle of Sri Ramakrishna is the title, of course everyone will say about Swami Vivekananda we are talking. But how he was the chief apostle? Did he actually preach what Sri Ramakrishna preached during his time? That is what we are going to analyze in today's this talk. Sri Ramakrishna, the great messenger of God with a specific mission for this time and this world, whom many people who are sincerely seeking God or searching for truth in this world, irrespective of whichever path they are following, it doesn't matter that they have to be following either Hinduism or a particular sect within a Hinduism. No, not at all. Whoever is a sincere seeker of truth, whoever is a sincere lover of God in the world, to all of them Sri Ramakrishna is a helper, a teacher, a guru, an apostle, a prophet, a messenger. To all of them. because he could help anyone and everyone standing anywhere in the world. So when Sri Ramakrishna said that Naren will teach, he actually wrote with a charcoal on the wall of the room, outside the room of where he used to stay. He painted a peacock, etc., etc., and then he wrote in Bengali that Naren will teach, and a couple of more lines with charcoal. He authorized Naren to be the teacher of the world. He authorized Naren to be the messenger, continuing his mission on the earth. And that's why during his last couple of months, when he was in Kasipur Garden House, and in front of everyone's eyes he was approaching the end of his time, he was teaching Naren behind closed doors about what and how of his message to be spread in the world. So there should not be any doubt in people's mind. And even after he is gone, after Sri Ramakrishna passed away, we find from the utterings occasionally from his other great brother disciples, several of them who were great in their own places, great spiritually and great as a leader of the people. Several of the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, they said, we can find it from their sayings and writings, that without going through the words and writings of Swami Vivekananda, we could not understand what Sri Ramakrishna said or he meant to us and what he wanted of us. Without going through Swami Vivekananda, without seeing through his eyes, it is impossible to understand, fathom the depth and the universality and the beauty of Sri Ramakrishna's teaching and his life. So there should not be any doubt in minds of ours, standing more than 100 years from that time, that Swami Vivekananda was the chief apostle of Sri Ramakrishna. But in which sense? Because when we try to understand what Sri Ramakrishna taught us, or what was his message, then we have to go back to the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We don't have any other alternative source, basically. The gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the beautiful book that were being bit by bit prepared by his most able follower, M, who was a school teacher, who was a very, very devoted follower of Sri Ramakrishna, who was very intellectually sharp and great thinker. And in course of time, he himself was considered a great saintly figure. After passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, there have been numerous young men and women who came in contact with M or Mahendranath Gupta. They entered into the monastic life, became monks and nuns, and those who did not, even they became great householder devotees. So M himself was not an ordinary person, and what he said about Sri Ramakrishna's utterings we find that that is very having a different kind of a tone. It is talking about bhakti. It is talking about bhakti, the devotion, as the primary path for this age, he says. We find in the pages of Sri Ram, the Gospel, many, many times, dozens of times, this has been mentioned. That Sri Ramakrishna says that for the sincere devotees of God, for the sincere seekers of truth in this Kali Yuga, in this Iron Age, we translate it like that. In this Kali Yuga, bhakti is the way to go. By bhakti, he meant the path as prescribed by the great saint Narada, Narada's way of devotion. Narada's way of devotion is, as we find in the Narada Bhakti Sutras, where he says that to worship God in all possible ways with your body, mind and speech, consider you as his servant and serve him in all respect. And that is the Narada's way of following the path of bhakti. And Sri Ramakrishna says that that is the easiest and the suitable most path for the followers of truth, or the path of seeking God in this age. This is what we find. And in case of Swami Vivekananda, we find it is a very different thing. It is a very, very different thing. The source book for Swami Vivekananda's sayings and writings is, of course, the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. And there we find a whole lot of many different things. Whole lot of things. All the different yogas he has taught. We can say he has said everything to everybody. Did not make any discrimination that for the householders, for this Kali Yuga, this is the way to go, etc. We don't see that. In fact, he said that what I am saying, I am a preacher and a teacher of Upanishad. I want to spread the message of Vedanta, make it open to all, which had been remaining secretly hiding in the caves and the forests, high up in the Himalayan caves. I want to bring it out from there and spread it out to everyone, which have been for ages being separated from public, general public, by saying that who is suitable and fit for listening to this great message of Upanishad, unless you are most suitable person, you will not be taught the message of Upanishad. That was the norm in the past, but now I have come to break that rule and make it open to anybody and everybody. And he did that. So, why this difference? Someone might say that, well, Sri Ramakrishna was talking to the householder devotees. All the things that are written there in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, noted down by M in the form of his diary writing, that was directed to, addressed towards mostly the householders, the people who would be assembling in his room or somewhere in Calcutta where he will be visiting, mostly on the weekends, and if at all when he will be visiting in Calcutta, even in the weekdays, it will be after their work in the afternoon, some such time. And to them he was teaching, whereas these young men like Narendra and Rakhal or Tarok or Baburam, who later on became the monastic disciples and about whom we are speaking, that they became the torchbearer, the messenger of their master, and Swami Vivekananda was the most important among them. They did not necessarily come during that time. So, they received a different kind of message, maybe. Is it so? That's why Swami Vivekananda was talking differently. But again, when we look deep into the audience that Swami Vivekananda was addressing, whether it was in the West or it was in the East, he was addressing mostly to the ordinary people, the generality of the ordinary population, the working class householder people who were serious about listening to the message of truth, to know about the highest truth that are there in the pages of Upanishad. They were also not extraordinary. Of course, these both groups, those who came to Sri Ramakrishna and those who came to Swami Vivekananda, listened to his lecture, they were exceptional in one way, or we can say one way. Of course they are exceptional, unless they were very exceptional and very, very fortunate people, how they could come to him or them, these two stalwarts in the spiritual world, and sat near them and came back again and again and listened to them. They must be very, very fortunate people. At least they had very good karma. Otherwise it could not have happened, and therefore they must have been exceptional, no doubt about it. But beyond that, we really don't see that the audience that Swami Vivekananda was addressing, they were different from the audience that Sri Ramakrishna was addressing. Both were householders, and both were people of the world, the generality of the householder, common, normal, seeker of truth, religiously oriented people that were coming to him. But nevertheless, these are the two different groups. On one hand, Sri Ramakrishna is teaching that the path in this Kali Yuga is the path of bhakti as taught by Narada. He says that so long as there is a very strong sense of I consciousness, the ego is very strong, and the identification with the body could not be removed, it is very harmful to say that Soham, I am he says. It doesn't help. It will be harmful not to say like that. Even he would be practicing that in front of those devotees. He will say that I am only the servant of God, and that is his practice. And he said that in this age of Kali Yuga, so much concentration of the mind is on the body. It is all focused on or centered on the body that is created out of food. The whole mind is focused on food, he says. And he says that people cannot get rid of the idea that they are one with this body. And this body consciousness is so very powerful and strong that to say that it is I am that divine spirit is impossible for him. So, instead of practicing that I am he, it is most important or necessary to practice that I am a servant of God. I am a devotee, I am a servant of God, and live like that. Because he said that if this I won't go away, then let that remain, that rascal I remain as a servant. He said, if that I won't go away, then let that rascal I remain as a servant. This was his very famous sayings, and he very clearly and openly and prominently he preached that, emphasizing on bhakti. Whereas we find that though Sri Ramakrishna says that jnana is very difficult, not that Sri Ramakrishna did not teach jnana, in the pages of this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna we find that all the four yogas have been taught there. He has mentioned all these things. But what I am saying is, where is the focus? He says that jnana is very difficult and one cannot attain knowledge unless one would be able to rid of body consciousness. Until and unless that has happened, until and unless one has been successfully dissociated oneself with identification with the senses, and the whole mind is going out for the sense objects, until and unless that happens, jnana is just impossible to practice or to achieve or to attain. And therefore it is easier and it is more desirable for the ordinary householder devotees in this Kali Yuga to practice bhakti. Then Swami Vivekananda came as his chief messenger, and what he said? Did he preach bhakti? Because we find that he also has preached many different things. He has preached so many different things that his brother disciples and his own followers and disciples, they knew very well that whenever Naren will pick up any subject or topic, then that will appear as if that is the only thing and that is the most important thing, and everything else pales or fades away in comparison to that. So, whenever Naren is talking about bhakti, or Naren is talking about selfless service, or Naren is talking about deep meditation and Raja Yoga, then Naren is absolutely into that. But though he has spoken on all four different kinds of yogas, we cannot say that Swami Vivekananda spoke just in a very general sense. He spoke everything to everybody, because that means he spoke nothing, as if there was no special message of him. Naren himself has occasionally mentioned that he had a message for this world. Like Buddha had a message during his time, Naren has some such prophetic message also we know. That as Swami Vivekananda, he said that he had a message to deliver. And until and unless he has delivered that message, he won't be getting rest or he will not be free to go. He had a message. And he had a message that was the message of his master. And that he was delivering. When we take it in that light, then there must be a specific message. It is not that all message is everything he is delivering. There is a specific message. Of course, in both the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, we find that they had many commonalities, and that is very understandable. Because in the case of both of them, these messages or teachings, whenever they are being said, they are coming out from the depth of their own first-hand personal spiritual experiences. From the treasure trove of that, it is coming out. So the message of very universal nature, the message of many different paths leading to the same goal, the message of the spiritual nature of individual self, the message of ultimate goal of every human life, they are all same. There is no difference. But then we find that in case of Swami Vivekananda, there is a very special kind of a message. And that message is about the universal message of Upanishad that borders the non-dualistic message, the Advaita. That he has been teaching very openly and universally to everywhere, to everybody, without any discrimination. That whether even a hall of 3,000, 4,000 audience, he will not be shying away from talking about the non-dual message of Upanishad in front of them. Which in the books of Upanishad they would say that unless a person is suitable or fit for listening to this message, don't deliver this message. But we find in the teachings of, or the talks and writings of Swami Vivekananda, that he was giving a different kind of message. He was proclaiming that man is basically divine. Man is divine. Man means man, woman, everything, the individual soul. That proclamation he was not shy about making. And this philosophy of Advaita, that man was basically divine, he was talking everywhere. And this was not a qualified monism. This was not a qualified monism, which is known as Vishishtadvaita. Like the spark of the fire, the individual soul is a part of the whole. It is not like that. Swami Vivekananda was not teaching that qualified monism. He was very open and very bold and very clear in preaching that the soul is divine, it is one with that divine being, and it is whole, it is not the part. It is the whole, pure and divine being. It is one with that. identical with the divine being. So we find that this message he has been saying again and again. For example, in the Jnana Yoga lecture we find some of the talks in Brooklyn 1896. He is saying, "You are the omniscient, omnipresent being of the universe." In his lecture publicly, he is addressing to thousands of people. Those days the congregation used to be of thousands. The auditorium had to be made acoustic building, and the speaker had to speak very loud also, and everybody could hear. And there he was shouting, thundering voice, that you are the omniscient, omnipresent being. How could that be? Is it that everybody is omnipresent, omniscient being? Can there be many of them? No, of course not. When he is saying, you are that one divine being, he is asking his audience to focus on that universal nature of his self, where everyone else is embraced or entering into that oneness, and there is no second one outside him. We find that in his lecture he says, you are only one. There is only one such self, and that one self is you. Therefore, know that thou art he. Thou art the God of this universe. You are the one being in the universe. Stand up then and be free. This is a very different kind of a message from what we read in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Very different kind of message. That is what Swami Vivekananda is repeating again and again. It is not that just it is isolated. Once he said so, but otherwise he was teaching something different. No. This was almost the emphasis of all his teachings and talks and lectures in the West as well as in the East. The focus is very different. He says, in inspired talk we find, never forget the glory of human nature. We are the greatest God that ever was or ever will be. Christ and Buddhas are but waves on the boundless ocean which I am. Bow down to nothing but your own higher self. Until you know that you are that very God of gods, there will never be any freedom for you. So this is a very pure non-dual Advaita Vedanta he is teaching. He is talking to people the message of divinity of soul, and he is talking to people about the freedom as the ultimate goal. And that freedom of the soul cannot be achieved without realizing this divinity of the soul, which is of the non-dual nature, which is of the nature of Advaita. This is Swami Vivekananda's message. So as a messenger of non-dual Advaita, how could we accept him as the chief apostle or the messenger of Sri Ramakrishna, whom I was trying to understand that he was basically talking to the devotees about the path of bhakti as taught by Narada as the easiest and the simplest way to achieve the goal of human birth. And the goal of human birth is, of course, liberation of the soul, the freedom. And that freedom is to be achieved through God realization. That God realization which could be achieved only by bhakti in this Kali Yuga. This is the message of Sri Ramakrishna. He says that in this Kali Yuga, when everybody is very, very body conscious, when everybody is so much dependent on the food, where they cannot get rid of the idea of the identification with the body and identification with the senses, here some such thought that I am that is not helpful. This is what Sri Ramakrishna said. And that is what Swami Vivekananda said. And Sri Ramakrishna says that he is my true follower who will be teaching after me. And he came out and he started teaching, and what a change in him. What a change in him. Some of his brother disciples at the time of when Swami Vivekananda was in the West, and he was teaching this non-dual Vedanta, not necessarily because what he was teaching, but because he was never mentioning the name of Sri Ramakrishna. Some of his brother disciples, they were so sorry about him. What a change has happened to our Naren. Look at him. He never even mentions his guru's name and pays credit to him for whatever he has become now. What a change has happened to Naren. Some of his brother disciples even said like that. And from this kind of teachings, and Naren, who said that I have a message to the world to deliver, we find the message also looks very contradictory. So how we should make sense of this, that Swami Vivekananda was the chief apostle of Sri Ramakrishna, his teacher. When we look back to the time of Sri Ramakrishna, which was not too different from the time of Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda, immediately after the passing of Sri Ramakrishna, for 4 years he was traveling east, west, north, south of the Indian landscape, mostly on foot, occasionally by train, meeting many people, trying to live the life of a mendicant monk, trying to learn the history and the geography and the culture and the religion of the land firsthand, meeting people everywhere, the prince and the pauper, all different levels. And the time that he had after that period, when he reached the west coast of North America at Vancouver, and from there onwards for about 4 years, and then again returning back to India and a little over 1 year, second time. This was the time he spent in the West. And there, we cannot say that they were very different times, could we? Because Sri Ramakrishna gave up his mortal coil in 1886, and from 1887 onwards, Swami Vivekananda started traveling. In 1893 he was there in North America, and by 1901 he has almost finished his job and he was packing, and middle of 1902 he is gone. So it was not too far from this time and that time, but still we find that the message delivered by Sri Ramakrishna to the world and the message delivered by Swami Vivekananda to the world were messages delivered to two different kind of people. Two different kind of people. And this difference, apparent difference that we find here, that how could possibly Swami Vivekananda be the chief messenger of Sri Ramakrishna, while one is speaking this and another speaking that language? We find that answer lies, or the clue lies, in a saying of Sri Ramakrishna himself. As Sri Ramakrishna has mentioned again and again, that the highest truth is one. The highest truth is only one. And that had to be delivered to people in their languages. And that is one of the reasons why the God incarnates in different times, in different places. Because the language must have changed. It is not language like what are the alphabets and what is the grammar. It is the language of the mind. What are people thinking? How they are living? What are the value system of that society? That kind of population or the people, that is the language in which the God had to speak to them. When Sri Ramakrishna came, and he came in that eastern part of a rural India, of course from there he was transported to a urban atmosphere. Those days it was a very big deal, the urban city atmosphere of Calcutta in the proximity, and people who were educated sufficiently by that standard in those times, they were approaching Sri Ramakrishna, or Sri Ramakrishna was approaching them. Even for them, if we try to understand what kind of people they were that Sri Ramakrishna was addressing, he was addressing to this population, these householder devotees that were coming to him. They were working class people. Some of them were affluent landlords or something, and many of them were most ordinary commoners. But nevertheless, these people, they were living in a different time. They were living in a time that valued the age-old life and culture and the system and the religious beliefs that were existing for thousands of years there. Sri Ramakrishna was born in that atmosphere, and when he was addressing to many people there, even those who were college educated and apparently showing reluctance to accept everything that were prevailing at that time or they had inherited from their family, apparently they were showing some kind of skepticism in many of the things that were valuable those days, but deep in their heart they were rooted to a system that existed to the past. They are deeply religious of the Hindu age-old traditional ways. There was no doubt in their mind about all those belief systems that were existing at that time. And Sri Ramakrishna was talking to that population. It is a different population. If we somehow, with the help of a time machine, H.G. Wells' time machine, if we could be taken back to that time, perhaps we won't be able to communicate with them, converse with them, because it is a different mindset, a different kind of understanding, a different kind of a feel. What is right, what is wrong, what are the values of the social values, family values, human values, Very different. Sri Ramakrishna was talking to those people, that people of the Kali Yuga. Swami Vivekananda and Holy Mother Sarada Devi, they have said something very, very special. Both of them have said that from the birth of Sri Ramakrishna, it is no longer a Kali Yuga. It is a Satya Yuga. The tide has been turned, and we may not be able to fully appreciate or perceive even the change that has happened in the world. But surely it has happened. Surely it has happened. In a very subtle but very powerful way, the whole history of human civilization has taken a turn, and turned to the betterment. Many a time we won't understand it. Many turmoils will go on and on and on. And these turmoils for this ordinary human being, individual being, who cannot see beyond a little small window of time, for them it may not be fully revealed, but to a visionary like Swami Vivekananda, it is much clearer, even standing those days, that it is this different age that we are living now. We can think of the time period before the Industrial Revolution and after the Industrial Revolution. The civilization has taken a very different, very big turn. The old values have changed to a new value system where our focus, instead of being God-centered, has now become man-centered. Think of how many political and social revolutions have happened since the middle of the 19th century. The 1800s, middle of which Sri Ramakrishna came, and afterwards how much revolutionized this society is, where gradually the democratic norms and values, even socialistic norms and values, have become the focus of human mind, where people, instead of thinking about just themselves, they are thinking more about others. And in that others, they are embracing beyond human being, other creatures, the other life system, and everything, the planet. It is a very different kind of mind. It was not existing before. In this world, where the whole world is becoming one, the unity lies in the non-dual thought. There are two kinds of thoughts possible. One is purely materialistic thought. After leaving behind the old-fashioned age, where God-centered or God-focused mind was there very clearly and prominently, leaving that behind, the new age, the new civilization that we are living in, and in future also it will continue to grow and develop in a different way, but to this direction, the focus has turned towards man. That is what Swami Vivekananda was teaching. Swami Vivekananda was teaching to worship God. Sri Ramakrishna had taught the same thing. He taught people to worship God, but he was teaching to the people who were born and brought up in a different age, who would be understanding a different kind of a language, which will be most suitable and beneficial to them. And Swami Vivekananda gave a message which will be for the posterity, but he was talking the same teaching in a different language, because Sri Ramakrishna, as he said, that when Swami Vivekananda was asked that what was his idea about Sri Ramakrishna, then he said, he just paused a little bit, and then he said, oh, he was a method. He was a method. He was a wonderful method. So, Sri Ramakrishna and his message, it is a method with the help of which everybody has to achieve the highest goal of individual self, which is realizing the truth of the divine nature of the self. Just it requires the right kind of instrument or the carrier or the language that will touch his or her heart most. Swami Vivekananda spoke for our time, for us, in which he is talking, as I read this quotation, that he was asking everyone to worship that one God which is appearing and existing in the form of anything and everything. So Swami Vivekananda was, though he was teaching the Advaita, the non-dual Vedanta, but this Vedanta is not same as used to be taught in the past when he came out from India. This Vedanta was not about denying the world, refusing to accept anything in this creation as real and calling them to be illusion. It was not that kind of Vedanta. His Vedanta or his non-dualism was about that one living, palpable, universal being, call him God, which has appeared and manifested in multifarious, manifold forms, and his focus was to see that God everywhere. So he did not ask his follower to leave this world and go away and live in a solitude and then meditate on that self. No, he said that embrace, accept, and feel yourself one with the world and worship that God which is only one, and there are nothing which is not you alone. So this is a very different kind of a language, a very different kind of focus. Swami Vivekananda did not say anything which was separate from Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. He was the chief messenger of his master. Just what we find here when we try to understand and analyze the whole situation, that he was trying to speak in a language that would be most suitable for our time. So, in that respect, Swami Vivekananda was the most successful interpreter of Sri Ramakrishna's message. He said that Sri Ramakrishna was the Vedas and the Upanishad. He is reading that Upanishad. There are numerous pages, he could not finish it, only a few pages that he is reading. He is reading it aloud, and if we are capable and if we are sincere enough, then we shall be only understanding Sri Ramakrishna through the words of Swami Vivekananda. And this is how we can think of Swami Vivekananda as the chief apostle of Sri Ramakrishna. Thank you.
Should be left behind, to arise, to awake. Give us love, give us light, to arise. to awake for the world and our sake.